We continue to get updates about Auburn men's basketball schedule for the 2022-23 season, and now we know about the SEC Big 12 Challenge, Big 12 SEC, whichever way you want to put it. The Tigers are in it. Let's talk about who they're playing, when it is, and what it means for the basketball program this season. But before we do that, I want to welcome you back to the channel. Whether you're a member of the Auburn family or a fan of another persuasion, this is the E2C Network, where we cover the whole of the Auburn experience. We might tend to be a little bit Auburn sports heavy here, but if it's orange and blue, it is what we do. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of our content. And thank you to members of our booster club like Elizabeth Owen, who help produce videos like this. We've been doing a lot of videos lately about the Auburn basketball schedule, and that's because this is the time of year when it finally starts to be pieced together until an official full schedule announcement comes out. And I would suspect that that official full announcement is not too far off in the future with some of these pieces falling into place. The latest piece, one we've been kind of waiting on, is the Big 12 SEC Challenge deciding who was going to represent from each conference this year for this basketball season. And if you've forgotten that the SEC has more schools than the Big 12 does, I know they're supposed to be the 12, they're not. We're not going to get into that in this video. That's how it works, and usually there's 4 teams from the SEC left out. So Auburn, thankfully, is not one of those teams this year. It is going to be participating in the challenge because I love this thing every single year, even with it being placed in the middle of SEC conference play. But this year, the Tigers will be taking on the West Virginia Mountaineers away in Morgantown, West Virginia. The game will be played on Saturday, January 28th, so really just right in the middle of conference play, maybe more on the beginning side of that half than anything. But on January 28th, that Saturday is when it will be played. Now, this is going to be the 5th overall meeting between West Virginia and Auburn's men's basketball team. They are currently, though, tied 2-2 in terms of overall record when playing each other. The Tigers getting the last meeting under the win column when they met at a neutral site in Birmingham to play them. This will also be the second time that the Tigers will have traveled to Morgantown to take on the West Virginia Mountaineers. Now let's talk about this season, because we talked a little bit about the history and just the initial announcement, but let's talk about what might actually happen in the game coming up this season. And if you are a big fan of college basketball, you'll know the name Bob Huggins. He has been a mainstay for 16 years there at West Virginia, and I don't know that it's going to end anytime soon. Of course, maybe now I've jinxed him. Who knows? I don't know. But I do think that he is a great coach and is going to have this team ready despite what may have happened in the previous season. Now, I want to caution you, I'm going to give you some information here that may make you think that the Tigers are going to wax the Mountaineers out there in Morgantown. Not so fast, my friends. Here's the thing. They play in the Big 12 Conference. In college basketball, specifically men's college basketball, that is one of the power conferences, especially last season. More on that in just a second. Let me tell you about their non-conference performance. Pretty good. They only took 2 losses last year. One was to Arkansas in the Big 12 SEC Challenge, but one was also to Marquette, who is a perennial tournament team that pretty much is always there and seems to be competitive most years. That's their only 2 losses there. The problem came in conference play. As I said, one of the more formidable conferences. I mean, you've got names last year that were so good, like Texas, Texas Tech, Kansas, of course. You've got Baylor, who's risen up. Oklahoma does some things from time to time. They weren't as great last year. We beat them, but we were a pretty good team too. The point is, great conference, and you can understand how formidable it is. The thing is, though, is they were dead last. I mean, they got waxed by all of the Big 12 teams, which was really odd to see in terms of West Virginia having that happen to them. But keep in mind, just because they struggled last year doesn't mean that they're going to be as bad this year. I mean, their on-conference alone should show you that they can at least compete with people outside of their conference, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. The difference is that we'll be playing them just like they will be in the middle of our individual conference games, which can probably factor into that a little bit in terms of how each team's doing, their momentum and things like that. We'll just have to wait and see for January 28th to see how it works out. This is the part of the video where I like to talk about what it means for Auburn basketball, especially this season. I got a couple of different points to talk about. First one, though, and give credit to Marlene Navor, the SID for Auburn men's basketball, who pointed this out on Twitter, that basically Bruce Pearl and his boys are going to be world travelers this year. Now, not just with the season itself, preseason, because the thing that they're going to be doing first off is traveling to Israel, Tel Aviv, to compete with a lot of the international teams there. They did this a few seasons ago when they went over to Italy, and they can do this every few years. We'll count it as part of the process of going through the season because it's going to get us ready for the competition coming up. Count that along with the Cancun Challenge, which is another international event that Auburn will be taking part in this season and actually count towards the season. On top of that, our West Coast tour out to USC and to Washington. And we did videos on those previously here on the channel. If you'd like to check out the information from that, please do go see them here on our channel. There's also now Morgantown ahead into West Virginia, which is just going around the world for the Tigers. But besides being world travelers, what this means is that it set them up for a very good non-conference resume if they can win them. Think about it this way, and we talked about this on those previous videos I mentioned. With USC, that's going to be their marquee opponent probably on the schedule as the way things look right now in terms of not so too early, whatever you want to call them, top 25 rankings that are out now. But also Washington's going to be pretty formidable as well, being in the Pac-12. And now you add in West Virginia on the road. If nothing else, even if they're still struggling like they were last year, they're going to at least be a quad 2 win, if not a quad 1 win, with it being on the road, if Auburn can get those wins. So if Auburn sweeps these teams, we're setting themselves up pretty nice for that resume for tournament time. Now I want to talk about the actual schedule for non-conference right now. Just a quick overview again. First off, you got George Mason, then you got USF, Bradley, which will be part of the Cancun Challenge, and then they'll take on the winner of Northwestern and Liberty the next day in the Cancun Challenge. St. Louis at USC, at Washington, and now at West Virginia, but will be a little bit later as part of the Big 12 SEC Challenge. The interesting thing to talk about with this, though, is not just what we know, those 8 games that are scheduled right now, but what we might be able to piece together with the rest of the puzzle. And I do think that schedule is going to be announced pretty soon. So here are some areas where I'll have you look at for some games to be announced either individually or as part of the official full release. That USF game and in between the Cancun Challenge. I think there's room there for 1 to 2 games. In between the St. Louis game at Auburn and then starting that West Coast tour with USC, I think there's room for 2 to 3 games. And then also I'll point your attention to what is technically the end of non-conference traditional season after that Washington game for 1 to 2 games. I think that's where you're going to really see some announcements fall into place for the rest of the non-conference schedule. And finally, the biggest news, not just for your opponent of who you're going to be taking part of in the SEC Big 12 Challenge, but also this means is that SEC schedules are coming, which is almost like that final piece for the full schedule to be released. The Big 12 SEC Challenge is the last kind of thing that both of those conferences need to start piecing together their puzzles for how conference play is going to go. So look out, that's coming very, very soon. Before we go though, I want to give you guys what the rest of the matchups are for the Big 12 SEC Challenge, just in case you're interested. And we might talk some more about these in the future here on this channel. You got Arkansas at Baylor, Iowa State at Missouri, Kansas at Kentucky, Florida at Kansas State, Alabama at Oklahoma, Ole Miss at Oklahoma State, TCU at Mississippi State, Texas at Tennessee, Texas Tech at LSU, and of course, as we've talked about, the best matchup of them all, Auburn at West Virginia. I don't know about the individual matchup, but of course, that's the most relevant one to us as Auburn Tigers fan. So that's the news of the Big 12 SEC Challenge being scheduled and having Auburn's opponent known and when it will be happening. Want to know from you now, what do you think about the matchup? Let me know down there in the comments section below. Before you head out though, I want to remind you of a couple of things. If you haven't, smash that like button if you enjoy this type of content for yourself. If you also haven't, please do subscribe along with hitting the notification bell so you don't miss any of our uploads or live streams here. There's ways to help support our content listed in the description, such as becoming a channel member here by hitting that join button or heading over to patreon.com/E2C network to become part of the Booster Club and get yourself some perks for your support. Thank you for tuning into the E2C Network, where the Auburn family speaks. Thank you for tuning into the E2C Network, where we cover the whole of the Auburn experience. War Eagle.